Okay, so, you sent over some really interesting stuff about business leadership. It's like a survival guide for what they call the perfect leadership storm.
Right.
And it got me thinking, is the old way of leading even working anymore?
Yeah, it's a good question, and one that this document tackles head on.
Okay.
It's called the Benina Narrative.
Okay.
And it's from this group BLR, Business Leadership Reengineering.
Okay.
And, they're making a pretty bold claim. Traditional leadership is hitting a wall.
A wall made of what exactly?
Well, they describe it as this perfect leadership storm.
Okay.
Which is a pretty dramatic way of saying we're facing a bunch of global challenges all at once.
Right.
On a scale we haven't really seen before.
Like
geopolitical instability like the war in Ukraine, the energy crisis, climate change.
Yeah.
It's a lot for any leader to handle.
For sure. And on top of all that, the document mentions the need for a whole new economic model.
Right.
One that goes beyond just focusing on profits. I mean, how do you even begin to lead in that kind of environment? I mean, it feels like the rule book has been thrown out.
That's exactly their point.
Okay.
They're saying that the old playbook, the one that worked for decades, just isn't cutting it anymore.
Right.
And what's fascinating is they see this as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Particularly for smaller businesses.
Okay.
They're like speedboats, nimble and adaptable.
Right.
While those big corporations are struggling to turn like massive cargo ships in this storm.
I'm intrigued. So how do these smaller businesses, or really any business, navigate this perfect leadership storm?
Right.
Because I'm guessing this is where their Benina system comes into play.
You got it.
Okay.
Benina, short for Business Navigator, is presented as both a tool and a method.
Okay.
For what they call fusion intelligent business leadership.
Okay.
They're essentially saying that the best leaders will be the ones who can combine their own smarts with the power of AI. Think of it like a superpowered co-pilot for your business decisions.
All right. I'm listening. But before we get into the how, let's talk about the why. What specific problems with traditional leadership is Benina trying to solve?
Well, one of the biggest criticisms they have is that traditional leadership is too focused on hard financial data.
Okay.
And overlooking those soft factors that really drive a business.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, think about it. Spreadsheets can tell you how much money you're making.
Right.
But they can't tell you if your team is engaged, if your processes are efficient, or if your structure is actually supporting your goals.
So Benina is trying to bridge that gap to bring those intangible but essential elements into the decision-making process.
Exactly.
But isn't analyzing something like the soul of business a bit subjective?
Right.
How can they make sure it's actually providing useful insights?
That's where the AI comes in.
Okay.
Benina combines those soft observations like employee surveys or process reviews with the hard financial data.
Right.
To create a much more complete picture of what's really going on in a business.
So it's not just about gut feelings. It's about using data to understand the human element of the business.
Exactly.
Which can often be overlooked.
Yeah. And they're not just looking at the present.
Okay.
They're analyzing how decisions made in the past are still impacting the business today. They call it tracing the effects of decisions made yesterday and today.
That's interesting. It's like recognizing that businesses, just like people, have a history that shapes who they are now.
Right.
You can't just look at a snapshot in time. You have to understand the whole story.
Right. And Benina doesn't just analyze the past.
Yeah.
It also uses predictive modeling to help leaders anticipate future challenges and opportunities.
Okay. That sounds like a powerful tool. But we've talked a lot about the why of Benina.
Okay.
Can we get into the how? How does this all actually work in practice?
Well, the Benina method is broken down into 3 main stages.
Okay.
Diagnosis, navigation, and process.
So first you figure out where you are, then you decide where you want to go, and then you make it happen. Sounds pretty straightforward, but I'm guessing it's a bit more nuanced than that.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And one of the most innovative aspects of Benina is how it presents all this information to leaders.
Yeah.
Using what they call a radar picture and plotter images. It's all about making complex data instantly understandable, even for people who aren't financial experts.
All right, now you've got my attention. Can you break down these visual reports a little more? What exactly are they showing and why is that important?
Sure. Let's start with a radar picture.
Okay.
Imagine a radar screen where each segment represents a key performance indicator, or KPI.
Okay.
For example, one segment might show your profitability, another might track customer satisfaction, and another your employee engagement. The position of the blip on each segment indicates how well you're doing in that area, with scores ranging from 1 to 5.
So if I'm looking at this radar picture, I can immediately see where my strengths and weaknesses are.
Exactly. You can instantly identify areas that need attention and those that are performing well. And here's the cool part. The radar picture also projects where you're likely to be in the next 6 to 12 months based on current trends.
So it's not just a static snapshot. It's a dynamic tool that helps you anticipate what's coming next.
Exactly.
What about the plotter images? What do those show?
These are used to highlight the consistency or lack thereof between those soft and hard business arguments we talked about earlier.
Okay.
They basically show you how well different areas of your business are aligned with your overall goals.
Okay, I'm following you, but give me a concrete example. How would this help me make better decisions?
Let's say you're looking at the plotter image for your marketing department.
Okay.
On the one hand, your team is highly motivated, your processes are streamlined, and you're using the latest technology. That's all pointing towards success on the soft side.
Right.
But then on the hard side, you see that your marketing ROI is actually quite low.
So something's not adding up. Even though the team is doing all the right things, the results aren't there. That's a valuable insight that you might miss if you were just looking at the financial data in isolation.
Exactly. The plotter images help you connect the dots between those different aspects of your business and identify areas where you need to make adjustments.
This is all starting to make a lot of sense, but before we get too deep into the weeds,
Sure.
let's take a step back and talk about BLR's alternative to the traditional business life cycle.
Okay.
They call it the Quattro model.
Right.
And I'm curious to hear what makes it so different.
You're right. Let's shift gears and dive into that before we move on to the navigation or process stages.
Sounds good. I'm ready to see what this Quattro model is all about. It definitely has a more intriguing ring to it than just startup growth, maturity, decline.
I agree. There's definitely something refreshing about their approach. But we'll get into all the juicy details after a quick break. Stay tuned.
Okay, sounds good.
So welcome back. I think before we dig into the Quattro model, it's worth highlighting one of the most intriguing aspects of the Benina approach.
Okay.
The emphasis on understanding the soul of a business.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier.
Right.
It definitely caught my attention.
Yeah.
Because it's not something you typically hear in a business context.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not just about, crunching numbers and maximizing profits.
Right.
BLR is pushing leaders to think about the deeper purpose of their work.
Okay.
They pose some pretty thought-provoking questions in the document.
Like what?
What's the unique ingredient that draws customers to your business?
Okay.
What sets you apart from the competition? What gets everyone on your team excited to come to work every day?
I like that. It's about finding that spark that makes your business truly special.
Right.
That thing that makes you stand out from the crowd.
Right.
But how do you actually measure something as intangible as soul?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Isn't that getting a little too touchy-feely for a data-driven system like Benina?
And I think it gets to the heart of what makes Benina so innovative. They're not saying you can quantify soul directly.
Right.
But by analyzing those soft factors we discussed earlier, things like team dynamics, customer feedback, the effectiveness of your processes, Benina can help you identify the elements that contribute to a sense of purpose and shared values within your company.
So it's about looking for patterns and connections in the data that might reveal the underlying soul of the business.
Precisely. And once you have a better understanding of what makes your business tick on that deeper level,
Right.
you can start to make more informed decisions about how to navigate, those turbulent waters of the perfect leadership storm.
That makes sense. It's
Yeah.
like once you know your true north, you can set your compass and chart a course that aligns with your values and your vision for the future.
Exactly. And that brings us to the Quattro model,
Okay.
which offers a fresh perspective on the traditional business life cycle.
All right. I'm ready to hear all about it. I'm already picturing something a lot more dynamic than that old linear model of startup growth, maturity, decline.
You're on the right track. Instead of just focusing on time and money,
Okay.
the Quattro model uses two key axes:
Okay.
structure disorder and security uncertainty.
Okay.
And this creates 4 distinct stages: startup expansion, mature, and restart.
Okay, so it's not just a straight line. It's more like a cycle or maybe even a spiral.
Right.
Can you walk me through each stage?
Sure. Imagine a graph with structure disorder on the horizontal axis
Okay.
and security uncertainty on the vertical axis. The startup stage is in the upper left quadrant,
Okay.
high in uncertainty and disorder.
Okay.
Think of a new business just getting off the ground.
Yeah.
Things are messy, you're experimenting, and there's a lot of risk involved.
Right.
But there's also a ton of energy and excitement.
I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started my own podcast, it was a total whirlwind. Long nights, lots of trial and error, but also a sense of possibility that was incredibly motivating. What happens after the startup stage?
As you move to the right on the graph, you enter the expansion stage. Here you've figured out some things. You've got more structure in place, and there's a growing sense of security.
Okay.
You're hitting your targets, expanding your market, and feeling pretty good about yourself.
It's like you've found your footing and you're starting to gain some momentum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then as you move down the graph,
Uh-huh.
you enter the mature stage.
Okay.
Now, this is where things get interesting.
Okay, why is that?
Because you still have that high level of structure,
Okay.
but the sense of security starts to fade.
Why is that?
Because the market might be changing. Competition is heating up.
Right.
Or maybe your own internal processes are starting to feel a bit stale.
Okay.
You're established, but you're not as nimble as you used to be.
Right.
And you're starting to feel that pressure to adapt.
It's like you've reached a plateau and you're starting to wonder what's next.
Right. And this is where the Quattro model really diverges from the traditional life cycle.
Okay.
Instead of just declining, you move left on the graph and into the restart stage.
So it's not about decline, it's about reinvention.
That's exactly. The restart stage is all about going back to that place of disorder. But this time you have the benefit of experience and resources.
Okay.
It's about shaking things up, finding new opportunities, and essentially starting a new chapter in your business journey.
I like that.
And what's fascinating is that the Quattro model suggests that you can cycle through these stages multiple times throughout the life of your business.
It's a much more dynamic and realistic way of thinking about the business life cycle.
Right.
It acknowledges that growth isn't always linear and that even established businesses need to be willing to embrace change and reinvent themselves to stay relevant.
Absolutely. And this is where Benina can really help leaders navigate these transitions more effectively.
Okay, how so?
By understanding which stage of the Quattro cycle you're in,
Right.
you can use Benina to identify the specific actions you need to take to move forward.
So it's like having a roadmap for each stage of your business journey.
Precisely. But remember, a roadmap is only useful if you know where you're going. And that's where the navigation stage of the Benina method comes in.
Okay, so let's talk about navigation. How does Benina help leaders chart a course for the future?
Well, it all starts with those insights you glean from the radar picture and plotter images.
Right.
Once you have a clear understanding of where you are,
Okay.
Benina helps you identify what they call markers.
Markers.
Yeah. These are essentially the key areas you need to focus on to achieve your goals.
So they're like signposts pointing you in the right direction.
Exactly. And they break down the navigation process into 3 stages,
Okay.
mirroring the strategic, tactical, and operational levels of your business.
Okay.
First, you identify those big picture strategic markers.
Okay.
Then you drill down to the tactical markers, which are the specific steps you need to take to achieve those strategic goals.
Right.
And finally, you get into the operational markers, which are the day-to-day actions that will keep you moving in the right direction.
It's like a multi-layered map with each level providing more detail and guidance.
That's a great analogy. And once you have your map, you move into the process stage, which is all about execution.
Okay.
This is where you take those markers and turn them into concrete action plans.
So it's not enough to just identify what needs to be done. You actually have to roll up your sleeves and make it happen.
Exactly. And Benina provides a framework for developing those action plans, setting milestones, tracking progress, and making adjustments along the way.
Okay.
It's about turning insights into results.
I'm starting to see how all the pieces fit together.
Good.
It's like a comprehensive system for navigating the complexities of the modern business world.
Right.
But I'm also curious to hear how BLR plans to actually make this happen.
Uh-huh.
They've got this ambitious vision for a 3-step revolution.
Right.
And I'm wondering how they see it all unfolding.
Well, their plan is definitely audacious, but they seem to have thought it through pretty carefully.
Okay.
And I think it all comes down to a fundamental shift in how we think about business leadership.
Okay, I'm intrigued. But before we get into the revolution, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll dive into BLR's grand plan for changing the world, one Benina-powered business at a time.
Okay, so we're back and ready to hear about BLR's grand plan for Benina.
Right.
They're calling it a 3-step revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And from what we've learned so far about Benina,
Yeah.
it seems like they might be onto something.
It's definitely ambitious. Their goal is to fundamentally change how we think about and practice business leadership.
Okay.
And they see Benina as the key to making it happen.
So what's step 1? Where do they even begin with something this big?
Their first step is all about establishing credibility.
Okay.
They're targeting large institutions like banks and insurance companies.
Okay.
Those with the resources and influence to make a real impact.
Makes sense to start at the top.
Right.
And let it trickle down.
Right.
But those are pretty conservative institutions. How do they plan to convince them to adopt a completely new system?
Well,
It's not like they're known for being early adopters.
yeah.
They're suggesting a pretty clever approach.
Okay, what is it?
They want these institutions to start using Benina as a second opinion for their risk assessments, specifically when it comes to evaluating smaller companies or those strategic business units within larger corporations.
So it's like saying, hey, we know you have your established methods,
Right.
but run this through Benina as well and see what you get.
Exactly.
It's a low-risk way for them to test the waters without fully committing.
Exactly. BLR believes that the insights from Benina will be so compelling
Okay.
that these institutions will quickly see its value.
Okay.
They'll start to identify potential risks and opportunities that their traditional methods might have missed.
So step 1 is about getting those big players on board. What's next?
Step 2 is where things get really interesting,
Okay. How so?
because BLR sees the role of business consultants changing dramatically.
Okay, in what way?
They believe that consultants will move away from their traditional advisory roles
Right.
and become more like coaches.
So instead of just coming in, giving advice, and sending an invoice,
Right.
they'll actually guide their clients through the entire Benina process.
Exactly.
More hands-on and collaborative.
Precisely. It's about empowering clients to make their own strategic decisions,
Right.
using the insights provided by Benina, building long-term relationships based on trust and mutual understanding.
That sounds like a much more sustainable model. Okay, I'm seeing the ripple effect here. Big institutions adopt Benina. Consultants become Benina coaches, and suddenly it's everywhere. But what about step 3? What's the end game?
Their ultimate goal is to democratize access to this kind of sophisticated business analysis.
Okay,
They want Benina to become so user-friendly
right.
that any company, regardless of size or resources, can use it to self-diagnose, identify their strengths and weaknesses, and develop their own strategic plans.
Wow. So it's not just about changing how businesses operate. It's about changing who has access to the tools and knowledge they need to succeed.
Exactly.
That could be a game changer, especially for smaller businesses and startups.
Right. Who often don't have the budget for high-priced consultants.
Oh,
Exactly. It's a bold vision. That's for sure. BLR believes that Benina has the potential to level the playing field, giving everyone a chance to thrive in this new era of business. It's pretty inspiring, actually.
it is.
But let's bring it back to you, the listener.
Yeah.
What do you think about all of this? Does Benina resonate with you? Do you see it as a potential solution to the challenges businesses are facing today?
One of the most important takeaways from the Benina narrative is this emphasis on a more holistic approach to leadership. It's about recognizing that businesses are more than just numbers on a spreadsheet, you know?
Right.
They're made up of people with their own unique talents, motivations, and aspirations.
Absolutely.
It's about finding that soul of the business,
Right.
that driving force that connects everyone to a shared purpose. And in a world that's facing so much uncertainty and disruption, that sense of purpose might be more important than ever. So as you go back to your day, your meeting, or whatever's next, keep those questions swirling in your mind. What's the soul of your work? What markers do we need to navigate toward? And how can you embrace this fusion intelligent way of thinking to make a real impact? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Benina narrative. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.